welcome back to Dollars and Dragons. Today I have with me Jessica Marcrum. If you'd like to introduce yourself for our audience.
Hi, I'm Jessica Marcrum, pronouns she, her, and I'm a game designer, streamer, and sensitivity reader.
So we were talking a little bit, and I just wanted to continue the conversation now that we're here, and we're talking. So now you work from home, and you started out, I think it was 2018, 2017, writing, correct?
2018, yeah.
2018?
Uncaged was my first thing.
Yeah, tell me about like what it is that happened with Uncaged. It was like an open call from Ashley Warren, correct? How did that process start for you?
So Ashley put out a call on Twitter and also on her website. I found out because a friend of mine grabbed me in our friendly local game store and showed me the call and was like, you really need to write for this. And I was like, I've never written for an RPG in my life. And I've never written for an RPG. And I don't really play D&D. At the time, I was running a lot of PBTA. And she was like, no, but it's like a Greek mythology thing and it's a feminist thing. You have to do this. And you're a GM, like writing an adventure, same thing as GMing. So I applied and I got in, and now this is my job.
Amazing. What an amazing story. For you, you did a lot of technical writing prior to from your previous career, right? You don't have to talk about your previous career if you don't want, but.
Not really. I mean, well, everybody, a lot of people think social workers could write grants. Mostly I just wrote case notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in direct practice. So for listeners, I was, my previous career was as an opera singer, which had no writing whatsoever. And then I was a social worker, trauma therapist. So the only thing I really wrote was case notes. So writing was just something I did for fun. Like I used to write back in the heyday of like TV-gasm and the one that Bravo ended up owning. I used to write recaps for them.
Oh, really?
But they didn't pay.
What a random job.
Yeah, cool. So like a pretend job with a fun internet community, and I had a blog, and like that was my only writing, and like master's papers.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I guess you do write a lot in college if you're going for your master's for social work, right? Yeah, I think
like a paper a day kind of thing. So
okay. Yeah, I suppose that's where you get a lot of your writing discipline then from, huh?
I guess. Yeah, it's always reading and writing and never for fun.
Oh, yeah. So for your transition, like mentally in moving into writing adventures and things for fun, or like fiction or writing adventures in our niche, what was it like to start exploring that sort of creative space as someone who hadn't before? Was it like opening up a door to like a whole new realm? Was it like, was there music playing in the background and like there's flowers and sunshine, or like how was it for you?
The first time it was terrifying. I misread the call and didn't realize that she wanted pitches. I thought she was like, send me a rough draft of the adventure. So I wrote the rough draft of one of the adventures and then was like, oh, right before I sent it, thank goodness I caught it, and was like, she just wants a pitch. So I sent the pitch instead and saved myself the embarrassment. But when she accepted it, it was ready to go. But when I actually started writing, having a template really helps me. I'm someone who does really well with direction. So Ashley was great about that. And to this day, if someone's like, here's a template or a sample, and just take this sample and do it like this, but then you have freedom in all these other places, I very much like freedom, structured freedom, shall we say.
Yeah. No, I totally relate. I used to be a pantser, and when I was like writing growing up and stuff like that, and I would just like whatever came out of my brain, I would just like put it onto the page. That's how I wrote like fantasy stories and stuff. But when I transitioned to the military for a while, I learned combat orders and things like that, and writing that and sort of a structured outline approach. And then my brain shifted to outline. So since then, I'm pretty much an outliner. And I prefer that way because then what I do for like everything that I write, including like the Tower of Atonement adventure that I just wrote. I basically like I put everything in a box and then I say this box is for, and then I label everything, and then I go back and then
That's so nice.
and I write like this box is for scary narrative of when they approach the tower, and then I write this box is for narrative options for the NPC, and then that's how I go through and I design adventures.
I really love that. That
Works for me.
Yeah, and that's so helpful, I think. I think I kind of end up outlining in a similar way where I'll get a thing where I'm like, okay, so here's your 3 acts, or if it's a really long one, maybe your 5 acts. Here's where they're going to take place, or here's the vague beat of what they're about. I never title them in the outline because I'm so bad at that, but I'll be like, this one is going to deal with this. And then generally the next thing I just write like handshake sentence. And then like box text goes here. Box text is a description thing. And then here's what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes I just write like in the box or whatever. Sometimes I just write, this is the feeling I would like to evoke. And I don't even have any description or any idea of what I'm going to write at that point. It's just like, this is where I want to go with the tone in this next section. Any notes in my first outline or whatever is like pretty much how I do. I'm writing a new adventure. And I guess by the time it comes out, maybe I'll like have previewed this for the people who are interested in the vineyard, but I just wrote like a pitch for it, and that's how I normally start, is I like write maybe a paragraph or two of like, what's the hook, what's like the general story, and why is this interesting. And I wrote basically like, I would like to write an adventure like Glass Onion, but set in like have you seen the movie? Okay, so I figured, but you just
like,
strike me as the type.
How many times?
You strike me as the type. So but it's not a bad thing. But what was I saying? Okay, so it's gonna be like there's gonna be a party, and I would like so the Vineyard like is a criminal organization that has control of necromancy, and I was thinking that it would be cool if there was a Glass Onion style adventure, but all of the people involved, or the people that are clues or witnesses, or what do you call those, suspects, are dead people who were resurrected.
Oh, that's so fun!
Yeah, so it's like a murder that occurred like 300 or 400 years ago, and it's something that like Ashlyn, the head of the Vineyard, puts on as like a game. So I thought that would be a fun adventure, just as like a low level. Here's an introduction to the Vineyard, as opposed to like a normal combat one or something like that. So yeah, that's my pitch.
In games too, because they're so fun, and like there can be combat, but also like when people commit to it, it can be really rewarding for the table to figure stuff out together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those sort of things can be difficult to write well, because you always have that danger of like giving it away right away, or you feel like you do. But I find with most situations, you're probably best giving away too much information, because then they're going to argue amongst themselves anyway. Like,
yeah, I mean, you want to do, what is it, the 3-clue problem?
3 clue, yeah.
Yeah, so like put your clues multiple places they can find them, but also it's hard writing smart criminals sometimes. Because not being a smart criminal myself, having to think up a dastardly plan takes a lot of work. And it can be embarrassing when you're finally doing what you think you have executed as a good plan, and the table is like, they've figured it out, and they're like, this can't be the real plan. No one's this stupid. And you're like,
no,
maybe he is that stupid.
Yeah, I think it's especially difficult depending on the structure of the game. Some games really do not support mysteries well, and D&D is definitely one of those games that does not, especially after a certain level. Like, you just get all these spells that basically allow there to be no mystery.
Yeah, see the future, see through walls.
Yeah.
Spry on everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I think one of the things that you sort of have to, like, create this arena with your adventure after a certain level where you're sort of restricting those sort of abilities. And That's especially true for like travel or any sort of teleportation. Normally can be, I guess, sort of one of those conceits of D&D that you don't have as many times or situations where you're like, you have that Lord of the Rings moment where there's like this giant chasm, and like that's an actual like very dramatic moment. And there's so much that magic will spoil in D&D, I think.
I mean, I'm biased just because I writing directed a book that was all tier 4 adventures. So
Yeah.
I know that there are ways that you can make high level play really interesting and fun, but it is a lot of work. And you could do it
Yeah.
without restricting players' access to spells, but you have to make the enemies and the terrain just as powerful or more so than they are. So,
Yeah.
like, mess with their sense of gravity or have them fight gods, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's like get weird and wild with it. And having like a cozy little mystery, you're right, is not really going to be working at level 18 because they're not solving cozy little mysteries at that point. They're punching
Yeah.
God in the face.
Yeah. Let's talk about, okay, we're gonna skip all the other stuff and we'll come back to all the other stuff that we have planned. Let's talk, since we just talked about Uncaged Goddesses, let's talk about it. For designing high level adventures and things to keep in mind, what are some of the things that you learned in your process working on Uncaged Goddesses that you had not found out prior to, or new things to you?
Ooh, okay. Let me refer to the quick guide to running tier 4 that I wrote. Let me pull up my past work because I have no memory. Oh, okay. So I think a common issue that a lot of GMs run into when they think of high level play is that they just increase the HP of antagonists, and that's when you get really boring combat slogs, or they give them immunities and don't give the player characters weapons to overcome that. And again, that's when combat gets really long and unfun. And if you make it more about, motivations, like what do they want from this combat, then I personally find that more rewarding. Also, think people get nervous about wish when you get, especially in D&D and Pathfinder DMs, because like your PBTA GMs and your, of course, people are used to playing GMless games are used to the players taking control over the world. But D&D and Pathfinder and other traditional game GMs aren't so used to that. So giving players something like wish can be very scary. And I say let them do it. Let them break the world. Show them the consequences of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, that's where the fun comes in. Give them the power to break the world and then show them what happens when they break things.
I really like that attitude and that perspective for high level play, because I think in a lot of story arcs, maybe you've been playing this character for a short while, and you're telling in a fundamentally different kind of story in which this is the culmination of who someone is rather than their I guess come up story. What would you call that? Their manifestation story. So it's definitely a different type of story. It's like, what is this person's legacy going to be, rather than what is their formative year?
Like, do they become the big bad of the universe with their actions? Because at this level, they can.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a great I think perspective to sort of shift to for this style of writing. And that's definitely where I would like to end up with our higher level adventures that we're working on for that reason, because I think ultimately like a story that I find to be fairly interesting is like the kind of the ingrown story of like vampires. Like, do you lose control do you lose like your humanity? So I'm very interested in stories. And I don't think that they're like the default perspective of D&D is really, well, there's a lot of problematic perspectives, but like the like there's like the colonizer perspective, but like generally the perspective that is pitched for adventures is like you are the savior of this place that is going to fix things, or you're the only one who can resolve this circumstance, when I think perhaps more high level play especially is more geared towards what sort of moral conundrums can you, I suppose, responsibly tell. I think there's more room for ambiguity at the higher levels.
I think you can do ambiguity at a small scale, but it's going to be more like people that you know. On a higher level, it's your actions are affecting the world or the universe kind of thing. So you have a greater chance to do harm to protect the people that you care about. So your choices, choices should always matter, but they matter on a much larger scale.
Also, it can be a real bummer if like if you like if people like have some unintended consequence of what they have done with their character or what they've chosen to do. And yeah, I think that's like a constant fear of mine running high level play, is like they do something and then I'm just like okay, well now the whole city has died, or like something like, you know, like that. And I think that,
so that's where I'm like, yeah, that whole city died.
I need to be more like
what you did. You want to use wish to bring that city back? Okay, let's see. What's the cost of this wish? What happens now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like some of my games, and like sort of like the social contract between me as a GM and some of these players is like they don't want to be the villain.
Yeah.
And if unintentionally they become the villain, I think that
they'd be sad.
They would be really sad, correct? Yeah. So it's just like I'm just thinking about all those players where they kind of fall into that niche right now, and I'm just like, oh, I gotta be careful. But there's other parties that are just like, yeah, I would just love it if we just had a super tragic like consequence to like a difficult decision that we made, and that's just not every group. So yeah, I think that's it depends kind of answer for me.
And that's kind of, I mean, having run every Uncaged adventure, that's a common theme throughout the anthology, is that some of the adventures leave you feeling kind of, oh, I think I made the right choice, but I feel bad about it, which is not for every table. And not every adventure in the series does that, but there are certain ones where, you know, you have your players who are like, we're going to be a big damn hero. And then you go in there and they're like, oh, well, they seem to have their reasons for doing these horrible crimes. Am I going to let them keep hurting all of these people to protect these other people? What is the social contract here? What's the correct decision?
Yeah.
And there were a couple ones where after recording, the players were like, I feel funny now.
Yeah, for sure. It's
I like games that make you it's fun to go be a hero, but I also like games that make you feel kind of question what you're doing in a game.
Yeah, for sure. I actually had a table breakup because of something that happened that was not necessarily like a moral quandary type thing, but it was a choice that one of them had made. Like it was a Strahd campaign, and they chose to do something to make sure that, or try to make sure that Irina survived, and that person and Irina still died.
Oh God, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was super heartbreaking. Like I was weeping with this player after the game, and yeah, and the table, like there was some things that happened as a consequence of that that ended up making me choose to like step away from that table because it was too much. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things where it was like I had sort of predicted that something like that may occur with this group because of like me understanding those players, and I played with that group for 9 months. Like I knew them pretty well at that point as far as like their playstyle and like what they wanted and what they found fun. But yeah, it just, you know, in that case, I don't think that I made a mistake. I just let it happen. You know what I mean? Because you can make a choice as a GM and like, you know, have, you know,
fudge your dice.
Yeah, you can do that. I did not. They both died. So, and yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I run horror games so much that, and you have to stack the deck so much against players in order to make things actually scary, because without the danger, there's no tension. Without the tension, there's no stakes. And that's just sort of a thing that happens sometimes where after playing with me in horror games for a while, sometimes people are just like, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. And it's just not their sort of game. So it's definitely, yeah, it's an individual choice, I think, and it's individual like preference for a lot of that stuff when you have those ambiguous circumstances and potentially like kind of bummer outcomes.
I actually, speaking of running horror games, I love Bluebeard's Bride for
Uh-huh.
how it facilitates horror games.
Tell me more about that.
It's a game where everyone kind of plays, it's a PBTA game, and you are all playing aspects of Bluebeard's Bride. So you're all the same person, but one person is kind of in control at the same time. And you're exploring the house, but you kind of know from the start that it's not going to have a happy ending. And you don't have weapons. Even the move to be like violent is called dirty yourself with violence. So your main moves are dirty yourself with violence, cry out for help, or caress a horror. And basically everything in this house is trying to kill you. And there's a move that I love called Shiver with Fear. And it happens, you can do it voluntarily, but it's also involuntary. So like when a player is like, ugh, kind of thing, that's when the GM is like, so tell me what you're afraid of right now, and draws on player fears as well. And so
Interesting.
they tell you what they're most afraid is going to happen. And the GM tells you how it's worse than that.
That sounds badass.
I love it.
Yeah. Can you link me to that? I will
Yeah.
provide a link in the show notes. I'm very curious about this game. I need to try this out.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of like Coriolis and like Alien. I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy those systems because of the way that they approach rising tension and the aspect of danger and how that's sort of like approached in like the relationship between the GM and the players
Yeah.
as far as like transferring the dice back and forth more or less. So yeah, I think that's a very cool like way to interpersonally sort of rise the tension and tell the story together, where it gives both of you some stake and some say in what's happening. I think that is much better for horror games, honestly, because you get more buy-in, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like it a lot.
Check this out. I'm gonna take a look here. Has this been out for a while?
2017 or so,
Oh,
maybe
okay, okay.
I know I wrote about it for grad school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'm gonna check this out. I might run this for my community.
yeah, have fun with that.
All right. Let's talk about your sort of professional routine, you as a game designer, because you're sitting in the spot where, believe it or not, most people want to be, who listen to this podcast. So,
Okay.
you're speaking to like the people who are very interested to do what you do. What is your normal routine like? Do you even wear pants most of the time? Uh,
uh my normal routine. I have ADHD, so my normal routine should not be emulated by anyone because I have pretty severe executive dysfunction. But I do keep a calendar and try and keep on top of that. Sorry, it's funny. I was on a panel recently where they asked all of us writers, like, what's your schedule like? And there were a couple of people who were like, oh, I wake up at like 6 every morning and then I write for 2 hours straight and then I go for a jog and then I go like teach at a college class or I go do this other thing or I have the day free, but I'm very strict about my time. And I was like, I wake up when I get up. I take 2 hours to have breakfast. and, but yeah, it's really important for me to write every day unless I have specifically given myself that day off, and I will designate those days in advance. Because when you work from home, it's very easy to like, you know, this, to confuse work time with home time. And when you work on your computer and you play on your computer, there's a lot of crossover between those two. So designating actual work time is
yeah.
really important for me. Like I keep a time tracker and put in
Hmm.
like I'm working on this for this long. And doing like Pomodoro stuff doesn't help me, but actually having a visual representation of like, I worked on this project for this amount of time and I worked on this project for this amount of time has been really helpful for me to see in general, like how much I'm actually doing as opposed
Yeah.
to how much work I think I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. I find I'm pretty sure I am neurodivergent as well in the same way, or similarly. But do use the Pomodoro technique. That works for me for drafting. It doesn't work for me for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I find I'm kind of a workaholic though. So like for me, really the problem that I normally have getting started on a task,
Mm-hmm.
which executive dysfunction type stuff. And then for me, it's once I get started, I'm fine, and I will be focused on doing that for a long period of time. Sometimes to the detriment of my health.
Yeah,
Like
you
I will
forget to
just
eat.
yes, all the time. That's why I normally have like one big meal and then normally one or two smaller meals throughout the day. I find exercising really helps me sort of curb a lot of my tendencies as far as like how my brain works, keeps me more focused. So getting back on a solid exercise routine for me was like really great. I didn't realize how much it did for me when I was in the military, when I was working out all the time, like sometimes 2 times a day. But it really did a lot for me. And just even working out 4 or 5 times a week and going on walks and stuff really helps me in so many ways and like disconnecting. My problem is like, when do I stop working? Because as you can see, well, this is my bed. I'm pointing to it right
Mm-hmm.
now. So as you can see, like I like kind of live in my office right now, and soon, hopefully, I'm moving and I will have like a separate office. And like I'm so excited for that because then I can just like arrive at work and be at work, and I have to like leave the house and go to my girlfriend's house in order to like get that sort of mental break. Because even when I'm downstairs, I'm just like trying to focus on not working.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that as a brag. It's like, it's a problem. Like, I have extreme levels of stress because of it, and I don't stop working.
So to get started working, what really helps me is that I will tell myself that only gonna work for 15 minutes because 15 minutes is an arbitrary number that just seems reasonable in my head, right? And if I'm really struggling getting started, I run into problems with this when I have like 10 different projects I'm supposed to be working on. So if that's an issue, I'll first put them in like a list of like what needs to be done, and then I'll prioritize them by deadline. And then at that point, with the first task, I'm like, okay, we're going to work on this for 15 minutes. And I'll even set a timer for 15 minutes on my phone. And I just have to write or outline or research or something for 15 minutes. And usually, when that 15 minutes is up, I'm in the zone and can keep going. Sometimes, on a rare occasion, if I really hate what I'm working on, when it goes off, or maybe after 30 minutes, I'm like, oh, thank God. But what usually happens is the same thing that happens for you. Timer goes off, and I keep writing for like 3 hours, and then
Hmm.
the project's done. It's just the getting started. And also setting things up so that I'm like, okay, now is the time when I'm going to work on this project. And now is the time that I'm going to play a video game. And those are separate things that I'm doing on the same computer.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if writing stuff comes up in my head, I don't have to feel bad about that. That's for later. And if it's an idea, I'll just throw it in the notes app and come back to it when I'm ready to go. Because right now is video game time, or right now is TV time with my partner, you know? And
Yeah.
then when I'm back to my just write for 15 minutes, that's when I'll open everything up. And then I'm like, oh yeah, look at all this other stuff. And writing for 15 minutes is never 15 minutes because, getting all the tabs open you need to write an adventure takes 15 minutes by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I find yeah, I have a similar experience in a lot of ways. I really struggle to like get myself to finally just close everything and like turn off my I found that turning off my extra monitor really helps me, so I'm only like looking in one direction. But yeah, I have found that contrary to what people think, like me running 12 to 15 games a week didn't make me hate tabletop games. It made me hate every other type of game because every other type of game like is like on this computer that I use for work. So I'm just like, and tabletop games is my work, so I'm just like I stopped playing other games. Like I just don't
Really?
yeah, I just haven't. Like I think last game I played was like I don't even remember actually now that I think about it. Cyberpunk.
Okay.
Yeah, a while ago, and that's mostly because I really like the genre. But I might check out the new expansion, but we'll see. I have kind of mixed feelings about it because I'm trans, but um,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, I found finding the structure I needed in order to focus and actually start tasks was like the hugest hurdle for me
Mm-hmm.
to get in the mode for it. Because when I was growing up and I was writing, I was just like, this was like when we had dial up. I'm aging myself. And I
I
sat
grew up with
there.
dial-up.
Okay, cool. We're all cool here. So I would have to, in order to get on the internet, like we would have to use the phone line, and like obviously I didn't do that all the time because I wasn't allowed to as a teenager. So a lot of the time it was like me just sitting there looking at the Word document. There was no distractions, and that's how I learned to write. So for me to recreate that, there can be a lot of barriers and distractions.
It's hard. Working from home is hard. And I know uh having my brain will help. Sorry. Uh I used to tell my clients back when everybody was working from home in 2020. Well, not everybody, but a lot more people were working from home than we're accustomed to. Like having a designated room for working from home, changing your clothes so that you are, you have your work clothes and then you
Your
have
work
your
fit?
home reacts. Not a suit, but like if you're like, okay, this is what I'm wearing to work today, like actually getting up,
Yeah.
putting on makeup or doing your hair, or just being like, this is comfy, but this is what I'm going to wear to like look like a working person today. And then when you're done with work, change your clothes. I don't do that, and I should. Also, a lot of people turn off their work brain on their commute. So whether they're walking home or taking the bus home or driving home. And when you work from home, you don't have that.
Mhm.
So taking time in another room in your house, or if the weather's nice, taking a walk outside, or even just like sitting at your desk facing away from the way you typically face and like listening to music or doing a guided meditation or something can be helpful to turn off work brain. These are all good advice things that I don't always follow, but am healthier when I do.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I wonder how much of that I should start doing like after my games because like my schedule is kind of like afternoon evening for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
with like one game exception on Saturdays, and I finish up probably 8 to 11 p.m. my time most of the time. And I probably would really benefit from just like going on a walk and like listening to some music or whatever before I go to bed. Let's talk about Unseelie Studios. I'm very curious about this as new game studio, design studio. What do you call it exactly? Is it a design studio? Is it a game studio?
It's a game studio.
So this new game studio, what do you want to talk about? How has your experience been, and why did you all develop Unseelie Studios?
That's a lot of questions at once. Uh, what was the first one? What has my experience been?
Yeah, what's your experience been? How did it get started? And also, like, yeah, let's start
Okay,
with that.
I'll start with how it got started.
Yeah.
David and Gwen were the producers of Uncaged Goddesses, and I was the writing director. The three of us met on the original Uncaged and had just worked together frequently after that, not always all together, but like we'd collaborated basically nonstop. Like Gwen was one of the players on Three Flings, so we were in constant contact for the last 5 years. It's been a long time. Um, and we'd work together on other games where I was a writer, she was an artist. David and I wouldn't say that we've been creative partners, but I would say that we have been on so many projects together that it would not be incorrect to say that have been creative partners for like 5 years. And basically, anytime I have been in desperate need of a layout or editing, we'll do like work for work. Like he'll do a layout for me and I'll edit something for him, because David Markuski is one of the most talented people in the RPG industry. And he does writing, editing, layout, art. He can do it all. He's so good. And he just blesses me with his presence. And so the three of us were like, we work really well together, and we were frustrated with the print on demand options that were available to DM's Guild. And also, as in ENNIE nominee, Uncaged Goddesses wasn't able to be, not as an ENNIE nominee, but it kept coming up because it was an ENNIE nominee. We weren't able to sell the physical copy of Uncaged Goddesses at Gen Con because you can only buy physical copies of DM's Guild products from the DM's Guild. And people kept asking at Gen Con, like, oh yeah, I saw this was nominated for the Ennies. Can I buy it from you? Can I buy it from you? And we're like, no, but here's the website where you can buy it. You can get it in like 2 months kind of thing. And it was frustrating. And I know that that's like the DM's Guild rules, and we knew that going in. But also, if you haven't seen the cover art that Gwen did for Uncaged Goddesses Friday, I know that you have, but it's beautiful gold. And we really wished that we could have done a special edition with gold foil, but that printing option is not available. So those two things combined, and we're like, it would be really neat if we could, for our next project, if we could sell it physically ourselves and have it printed really beautifully and make a cool adventure. And then we're like, well, why don't we incorporate? And then, this first one we'll make ourselves, and then we'll maybe be able to hire people that, either have worked well with or that we are inspired by, and pay them well, as, people have brought us up and paid us well and treated us nicely in the past. Like, we really look to MCDM and what they've done with Arcadia as like the gold standard, and would love to do something similar to that. So we were going to release a mini campaign, and then the OGL thing happened, and we no longer wanted to be tied to D&D. So instead of releasing a mini campaign, well, I should now say, in addition to releasing a mini campaign, it's not going to be a mini campaign for D&D. It's going to be a mini campaign for a brand new game system that we are currently creating. And so that has kicked our timeline down the road significantly, which has been frustrating from a financial perspective, but also really creatively liberating.
Yeah.
It's a very long answer.
No, it was wonderful. I loved every part of that answer. I felt like I was on a fucking journey. Like, I just hyper focused on like you just traveling through the cosmos while you were telling me that story. Yeah, so a few things. First of all, I as well look to emulate MCDM's business practices. Is the cat attacking your camera?
No, but he's in his bed and just did a big stretch, and the bed heater off of the desk, and he has fallen off of the desk. By doing that before, so I just had to yank the bed up onto the desk.
Gotcha. It's funny. But yeah, I too was kind of inspired by how MCDM purportedly was doing business. I didn't have any personal dealings, but I talked to a lot of writers and artists, and they all really like doing business with MCDM. And as you perhaps
They're so
know,
kind and professional. Like, I've never had to wait for a payment with them. They're just very supportive, and it's creatively enjoyable to work with them.
What's the difference, you think, for creative enjoyment on their projects?
I think part of it might be that they let us pitch within certain parameters, right? They'll be like, we're looking for something like GM tools or something. So give me some GM tools. And then you'll pitch 3 ideas, and they'll pick one of them. And then you write your rough draft. They're always really supportive with their constructive criticism, right? And they'll help shape your draft into something cooler and more interesting than you imagined. Mm-hmm. And I know that the kind of stuff that I write is definitely not Matt Colville's typical audience's stuff. Like, there was the first one that I wrote was, or maybe it was second. Yeah, the second one I wrote was called like, So Your Best Friend is a Monster. And it was like how to uncurse monstrous beings.
Uh-huh.
And one of the comments I got was like, why would you do this unless you were the monster kind of thing? And I was like, because your friend is a monster.
Oh my
You
gosh.
met a monster and now they're your friend.
What a
And they were
D&D
like,
mindset.
and
What
they
a
were like,
D&D mindset.
why? So then I put in rules for like, okay, well, if a player is cursed into being a monster, here's their new stats. But that opened up a whole new area of play. And it was fun to think of like, okay, how could a player, like, what would a player who is a drider act like? And how would that be mechanically not too powerful, but
Mhm.
also like cool, but a detriment to their life? Yeah.
Yeah, because curse is definitely, that's one of those things where it's like it's kind of similar to anything dealing with like applying some sort of disability to someone, and there's like kind of a conversation that goes on between, or should, between like the player and the GM as to how you approach that, and gaining consent beforehand is like important.
Yeah, I
I
think I
think
even said don't curse without consent.
yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like you're talking about a permanent alteration of someone, how someone imagines their character. And I think of like I think the best example of like this sort of thing is like when you think, or I say you just in a general sense, like we think, or most people think, like if their character is killed and then it's raised undead and used as a villain, that's a really cool story arc. And I remember like Matt talking about this, which he's done in like his stories before. But Matt is always talking to his players about whether or not it's cool, or like
Yeah,
he's gaining consent, but he just doesn't call it that. Like he doesn't say explicitly like this is a consenting relationship,
right.
in which I'm working with the player in order for them to enjoy it too. And I think some GMs kind of miss the hint there that all of those like super involved things that require your player to give up their autonomy of their creation,
Mm-hmm.
can be just sometimes a no, or something that doesn't work for certain groups or players because of how they've kind of constructed this character, and they're just not perhaps wanting to deal with the emotional fallout of it.
And there are some games, I'm thinking of PBTA games because I run them frequently for Magpie, but where that's actually written into your character. So, for
Mhm.
example, in Apillion, like once you level your character all the way up, aren't a playable character anymore. Like it says, like so Apillion is a game where you start as a little baby dragon and you go through the life of a dragon. And then ancient dragons either become statues that dragons can go to seek wisdom or pray at, or you just become like a spirit or a mist that occasionally like offers wisdom. And so once you reach that point, like you're not playing as a statue. The GM will
Yeah.
just say like, "Oh, here's the statue of your former dragon." And I think Thirsty Sword Lesbians has another thing like that too, where it's like you're an NPC or you're retired and you work out your, character's retirement. But that's kind of the goal, is to like
Yeah.
not be an adventurer anymore. It's not to become the most powerful creature in the world.
Yeah, it's to have that, yeah, and especially for a game like Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is really based around like the queer experience and like sort of working out your issues with your identity, literally. And like when you level up, quote unquote, like you are moving between adventures and like you're just changing your class, as each class kind of represents a traditional queer story in which like you're trying to sort of work out. And I don't say that for your benefit, Jessica, but I'm talking about Thirsty Sword Lesbians because I love that game, and also our audience needs to know more about it. And if you'd like to listen to me run it, I ran it on Three Black Halflings, and you can listen to it on their podcast wherever their podcasts are served. That's for my audience as well. Yeah, so I love Thirsty Sword Lesbians for that reason, and it's like a like most Powered by the Apocalypse games. It is really focused on like, let's find a way to tell a story together to where everybody leaving the table like feels good about what happened. Like that's such a powerful vibe that I think not enough tabletop games really utilize, but I do think that you have to do a lot of extra work when you're running a game like D&D, which is naturally very wargamey and antagonistic. And the relationship that I've seen, I saw a couple posts, I guess complaining, and perhaps rightfully so, about like the antagonistic relationship between GM and players that's baked into the system. And I'm thinking about like me as a pro GM and like playing with certain people, and like when I get bad vibes from people, it's because they're too antagonistic normally, or they play into that too much, and I'm just like, I'm not here to just like be the person that I need for us to get along. And even if I'm running a horror game and like I'm like allegedly trying to kill your character, or I may actually kill your character, I need for us to get along while we play this game. And if you're just gonna like carry over this sort of attitude that's baked into the system into our interpersonal relationship, that's not a table that I want to play at.
Yeah, I tend to think of RPGs as collaborative storytelling. And I know a lot of trad gamers just like screamed in horror at me saying storytelling. But like really, that's kind of the social contract is we're coming to play pretend together with rules. And it's like the GM needs to be having fun and the players need to be having fun. Yes, the GM is the fun facilitator, and sometimes they're doing things that are antagonistic to the players. They're the players' characters, but they're not out to get the players. Because if you set up that antagonism and set up this like me versus the table vibe, nobody wins. It's not I don't know, the whole like I'm gonna make your characters hurt so much. I know some people like that. That's not my preferred play style. I think we're here to experience something together and we're gonna make something really cool happen. And yeah, sometimes it's gonna be painful, sometimes it's gonna be really silly. And I think the best kind of players are ones who buy into the table experience, bounce the spotlight around each other, and also reinforce safety tools. Because sometimes someone might be too anxious to X card something for themselves or remind someone, like, hey, this is a line for me, and it just got brought up. And that's when you have somebody else who is like, oh, isn't this a line kind of thing? And that's when the GM or whoever brought it up can be like, oh, yeah, you're right, and take a step back. Everybody is coming to the table with that experience or that mindset. I just think it's more fun and more safe.
Yeah, and as someone who's I ran 500 games last year, and
Oh my God. Sorry,
did I just stress you out?
No, at the most I was ever running was 4 a week.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't my full-time job, right? I was also
Right.
like, I had a full-time job and then I was writing, but I had like 2 or 3 streams and then a pro game and a home game. And I was exhausted. So I can't even imagine
Yeah, well, yeah.
what your life was like.
I mean, it was, it was what it was, but it was very
And with
tiring.
strangers, like I think it's different. I don't know.
They started out with as strangers, but most of them, I have some tables that have been playing with me for like 14 months now, and
Oh, okay, cool. So it's not, I think just because I always run one shots
yeah,
for
different crowds.
Magpies. So it's
Yeah,
always like, it's not always different people. Like
yeah,
you do get some regulars, but it's Bluebird's Bride is always a one shot.
yeah.
Always. That's the nature of the game. So if I have people coming for Bluebeard's Bride, it's not really a campaign. So I
Right.
was just like, I can't imagine playing 500 games with strangers
Yeah.
in a year. That sounds exhausting. That's so many new people.
Yeah, I don't run many one shots. I only do 1 or 2 a month.
Okay.
And most of my games are campaigns. Because I prefer to have that pseudo friend relationship. It is a friend relationship after a time. It's like being a bartender, or being
Yeah.
that's essentially what it is. Or like I own the board game store, the friendly local game store that they come into and they play at. They're still like paying me money to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the same thing
They're
as
paying
though.
you to facilitate an experience. We're
Yeah,
like service
exactly.
workers.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's like, and I also do like a little bit of sex work on the side. So I mean, like, I still have that like kind of experience with people, like to where there's
Yeah.
like a transaction, but still,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we would both rather the experience to be
Enjoyable.
positive, yeah, and enjoyable between both of us. But yeah, I think, yeah, one shots though. Oh fuck no, I would not do 500 one shots. Oh god, that sounds awful. That sounds really awful. Going back to like safety tools and like talking about it, and what the entire reason I brought up like 500 games that I ran last year, was because I have safety tools as a big part of my table culture, but still I make mistakes, even as someone who's like doing this full time, perhaps in part because I do, but like it's difficult to do everything perfectly all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're running the game in such a way to where you can't be criticized or you are beholden only to your ego is a short road to disaster. I've X-carded myself before because I accidentally trigger myself. I've done that before. Like I've ran a sad plot. I missed my kids. There was a kid involved. I started weeping in front of my players, and I had to take a break
You're
and
like,
come
just
back.
kidding. There's not a kid anymore.
Yeah. No, I completely cut the plot. I was just like, I'm not running this NPC plot anymore. But it was about like a kid who wanted the soul of their dad to be set to rest in Barovia. That's all it was. It was like their dad was like a ghost. And my kids had been on vacation for like 3 weeks and they were coming home like that weekend. So I was like really anticipating seeing them, and I hadn't thought much about like them because I sort of like put that sort of stuff out of my mind a lot of the time. Especially from like me being in the military, I generally compartmentalize as like a way to shoulder stuff like that. But yeah, so it all just came back when I was role playing little Timmy, and yes, I don't do kid plots anymore because like that was not it. I didn't. It was kind of funny at the time, but like it was just like at the same time it was like that's unexpected. That's what can happen like in the middle of a game, and I tell my players like sometimes you broach onto stuff you did not expect to be a problem, and then because of what's going on in your life right now and you haven't dealt with it yet, it can come out in the game. If you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable, it can come out in the game.
I'm so grateful to the Three Flings crew. Three Flings is a stream that I'm a producer on, and I used to be the only GM. Now we rotate GMs, but since now instead of just running Uncaged, we spotlight independent games every week almost. But I'm so grateful to the team because not only will they actively use safety tools, with each other, they'll ensure that chat is also being mindful of stuff that's been X-carded. So you talking about kid stuff made me think of this because kind of joke among the stream for a while was that one of the players her character wouldn't take missing person cases anymore because so many of the early Uncaged adventures was like, my daughter's missing, and it ended up being your daughter has run away with her monster girlfriend. And so she was like,
that's a dream, really, right?
Right. So she was just like, I'm not going to look for your daughter. She's with her girlfriend in the forest or under the water or in the mountains. Deal with it. And made like a business card that said like Adara, adventurer, no missing persons. By level 20, right, they weren't looking for missing people anymore. And it was just kind of a joke, like no missing persons. And then my nephew was a missing person and he's been found. But I put a line on like, hey, we're not going to make missing persons jokes anymore because like it's not funny to me. And the cast was cool with it, but it like chat didn't know. So occasionally they would be like, lol, a missing person case. And the players and the mods were immediately like, hey, we're not joking about missing people right now. Thank you. And then provided like a link to the search for my nephew, which was just so sweet. And I really appreciated that.
Wow. That's real.
Yeah.
That's some real shit right there. Damn.
But now we can joke about it again, that he's back and fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that's the case.
Debbie Downer brought down the stream. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's been a couple of podcast recordings, but since the last time I cried, so this is good.
Oh no, I didn't mean to make you cry, Freddie.
No, I'm not crying yet. I'm not
good.
crying yet. I'm not quite there. I was almost there. So Flee Mortals. You don't have to necessarily talk about spoiler territory. You can talk in general terms, or you can talk about what was your experience like writing for Flee Mortals, how excited you were about it. Let's talk about Flee Mortals.
Like I said, I love writing for MCDM. Anytime they want to hire me, I am right there. So I am a little bit known for writing hags at this point. People know that I like hags, and now people know that I like vampires. And so James Intricazo reached out to me and was like, hey, would you like to redo the hags for the D&D hags for Flee Mortals? And I was like, yes, I would love that. And so that was what I wrote. And he gave me some guidance on them, like, because Flea Mortals has new types of monsters. Like, this one's a controller, this one's a striker. I forget the actual terminology. It's been a while
Mm-hmm.
since I wrote those, but you know, there, if I pulled it up, I could find it. I know one of them is a controller. And
Mm-hmm.
so they should, their action should be this kind of thing. And but anything else was free reign. And he liked him so much, he came back and was like, Matt really likes these. He wants you to write a boss hag and needs it to be this CR. And I was like, I would love to do that, because there were a couple hag concepts that hadn't fit into green sea or night hag. And that was, you know, the idea of like a hag with a little familiar and the cat lady hag. So
Nice.
I had to do that, and I just had a blast redoing hags, because my sticking point is that it is absolute nonsense that the sea hags in the monster manual have no spells. They're hags, they should
Oh,
have
yeah.
spells. So the Flea Mortals sea hag has spells. She can control water like a sea hag should.
Absolutely, yeah. So sometimes I feel like a lot of those monsters, for whatever reason, they were like, you know what? We could design something new and interesting, but instead we're just going to cut all that and they get multi-attack.
I think they're trying to change that direction, because it does seem, I mean, that's the easiest way to make a monster tougher, is to boost the HP and make them attack more, mess with the action economy.
Yeah.
But like, give them something cool to do, right?
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah, I'm very excited to pick up Flea Mortals when it comes out, and hopefully, is that soon?
I have no idea, but I assume so,
Okay,
given how many packets have come out.
right.
For people who backed it, there are, for people who work on it, there are little packets that come out, I think, every month,
Mm-hmm.
with samples of monsters and layers and additional rules. And yeah, there's I have something else coming out in there. They are doing something fun where they're having the person who wrote a boss monster is not going to write the lair for that boss monster. Someone else is going to write that boss monster's lair. So we're getting to take on lairs for each other's monsters. Uh
Oh, cool.
yeah. And I think Sarah Madsen wrote the one for my hag and just did such a good job. It's so fun.
Actually, you know what? You know what? I was just talking to Sarah about that. Actually, she's on the Vineyard team, and I was talking to her about, and she just told me, "Yeah, I just wrote a lair for some hags, and it just the light bulb just
Oh,
happened."
yeah.
Which, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
she knocked
Sarah's
it out of the
great.
park.
Sarah's great. Oh, geez. I would say if you're out there and you need a writer, hire Sarah, but Sarah's fucking booked. Stay away from Sarah.
Like, Sarah's mine.
I Sarah's got only so much free time, and I need Sarah for that little bit of sliver of time that she can give me for my project. Fucking hands off, Sarah. But yeah, so gosh, okay, we're drawing down to a close. I want to give you some room to talk about how people can start following Unseelie Studios and when they can start looking forward to you all releasing some more stuff, and maybe the next product that you are working on.
I'm working on a lot of products right now. So you can start following me on Twitter at miss_Jess03. You can follow my website at jessicamarcumwrites.com. You can sign up for Unseelie Studios. You can subscribe to our website at unseeliestudios.com. Follow us on Twitter at Unseelie Studios. And those are the best ways to stay in touch with us. We have pushed our timeline for the release, so I cannot tell you exactly because I don't want to lie. It was supposed to be launching around now. Now I'm going to say at earliest fall of this year. I'm going to say this year, 2023, is the plan. I just can't give you any more specifics than that because the new OGL stuff was a surprise. But we've got some really cool stuff already with it, and we're really excited with where that's going. And in addition to that, I just released the crowdfunded version of Oops All Draculas, so you can grab that on DriveThruRPG or itch.io. I have something coming out for Mongoose Press. It's an adventure for their game Shield Maidens that deals with the war between the elves. And yeah, that's the main stuff that I have coming out. I'm just looking at what have I been writing. Oh yeah, and if you backed the Owl Bear plushie with Metal Weave Games way back when, and have heard tell about the lore book, I wrote that lore book. So get excited for that, because that'll be coming soon.
I'm just Googling all this stuff so I can provide these links. So, okay, I
Sorry.
found it. Yep, no, you're good. All of those links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to follow Jessica and check out what Jessica's doing here in the year of 2023. I think that's it. I guess I just pushed
too
the stuff on.
Too many things. I was just looking at what else I have to work on today, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing 2 panels on Friday. I've got this to work on.
Oh,
for
who?
Magpie, they're doing a little con for their Discord people. So I'm doing a panel at 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday called "Being a Fan of Your Players," and then another one on 4 that's on running horror in PBTA.
Where can they find you on if they want to play a game with you?
Sign up for the Magpie curated play program. I usually just run 1 game a month with them, but I might run some more now because I am having more free time now, but we will see, because right now that's what my schedule allows. Okay, so cool. You could play in that game.
Cool. I've added that to your show notes as well in case you want to play with Jessica. All right. Thank you so much for coming by, Jessica. It was a blessing to talk to you. Hi. Thanks for listening. If you want to support me, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/isfriday, or you can find some of the work that I'm doing at vineyardrpg.com if you want to pre-order the book that we made.